first thing Joseph heard was not the sound of rescue, it was the sound of voices above him. His brothers were speaking somewhere beyond the mouth of the cistern, their words falling into the darkness like stones. Some voices were sharp, others were distant, and every sound seemed to remind him of the same terrible truth. They had not thrown a stranger into the pit. They had thrown their own brother. Joseph looked up and saw only a circle of sky. The sun was still shining above him, bright over the fields of Dothan, but down where he lay the light was thin, broken, and far away. Dust clung to his hands, the rough stones scraped against his skin. His robe was gone, the robe his father had given him, the robe that had made him feel loved, the robe that had made his brothers hate him. A short time earlier, he had been walking across the open land, searching for them. He had come because his father sent him. He had come to see whether they were safe. He had come as a son, as a brother, as one carrying concern from home. But when his brothers saw him coming, they did not see concern. They saw the dreamer. They saw the favored son. They saw the one they had resented for years. And now Joseph was below them, trapped in an empty cistern, listening as the people who shared his blood decided what to do with his life. He may have called their names, Reuben, Judah, Simeon, Levi. He may have pleaded with them to remember Jacob, to remember their father's face, to remember that he was young, to remember that whatever anger had lived between them, he was still their brother. But the voices above him did not soften. Then Joseph heard something else. Camels, the slow movement of a caravan, the sound of men traveling with goods through the land. For one fragile moment, hope may have risen inside him. Perhaps someone had come to help. Perhaps his brothers had changed their minds. Perhaps the nightmare would end before the sun disappeared. But then he heard the words. His life was being discussed like a price. His future was being weighed like merchandise. The boy who had once dreamed of sheaves bowing in a field, the boy who had once seen the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bending low before him, was now lying in darkness while his brothers decided how much silver he was worth. Joseph could not yet see Egypt. He could not see Potiphar's house. He could not see a prison. He could not see Pharaoh's throne room. He could not see the storehouses that would one day feed a hungry world. All he could see was betrayal. All he could hear was the sound of his own brothers selling him away. And yet, far beyond what Joseph could understand in that moment, the God who saw him in his father's tent also saw him in the pit. Long before Joseph stood before kings, he lived as a son in the household of Jacob. He was 17 years old, young enough to still carry the confidence of a boy deeply loved, but old enough for the tensions around him to become dangerous. Jacob had many sons, but Joseph held a special place in his heart. Joseph was the son of Rachel, the woman Jacob had loved with a love that had shaped much of his life. Rachel was gone now. Her absence had left a quiet ache in Jacob's soul, and perhaps every time Jacob looked at Joseph, he saw more than a son. He saw memory. He saw love. He saw the face of the woman he had lost. He saw a living reminder of something precious that death had taken from him. So Jacob loved Joseph openly, too openly. In a family already marked by rivalry, old wounds, and complicated loyalties, favoritism did not remain hidden. Everyone could see it. Every brother could feel the difference. Every conversation, every glance, every gift from Jacob seemed to confirm what they feared. Joseph was not treated like the others. And then came the robe. It was not an ordinary garment. It was a visible sign of affection, a robe that set Joseph apart. Every time he wore it, the fabric seemed to speak before he did. It said that Jacob saw him differently. It said that Joseph belonged close to his father's heart. It said that he was favored. To Joseph, the robe may have felt like love resting on his shoulders. To his brothers, it may have felt like rejection woven into cloth. Bitterness does not always begin with shouting. Sometimes it begins in silence, in the place where a person feels overlooked. It grows through comparison. It deepens through repeated wounds. It hardens when love seems unequally given. Joseph's brothers did not merely dislike the robe. They hated what it represented. And because they hated what it represented, they began to hate the one who wore it. The distance between them grew. Words became sharper. Silence became heavier. The household of Jacob, which should have been a place of belonging, became a place where jealousy moved from tent to tent like a shadow. Joseph was still young. Scripture shows him bringing a bad report about his brothers to their father. Whether he fully understood the weight of his words or not, it widened the wound between them. To Jacob, Joseph was beloved. To his brothers, he was becoming unbearable. Then Joseph dreamed. In the ancient world, dreams could carry weight. They were not always dismissed as passing images of the night. They could feel mysterious, significant, and filled with meaning. Joseph dreamed that he and his brothers were binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly, his sheaf rose and stood upright, while the sheaves of his brothers gathered around it and bowed down. When Joseph told the dream, the meaning struck his brothers immediately. Would he truly rule over them? Would he truly reign above them? The dream did not soften their hearts. It sharpened their resentment. Joseph was already favored too much. Now he spoke as if heaven itself had placed him above them. Whether Joseph shared the dream with innocence, excitement, or youthful lack of wisdom, his brothers heard only one thing. The younger brother believed he would be greater than them, and they hated him even more. Then Joseph dreamed again. This time, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. When he told it to his father and brothers, even Jacob rebuked him. Would Joseph's father, mother, and brothers truly come and bow before him? But Jacob did not forget the matter. He kept it in mind. His brothers kept something else. They kept envy. The dreams became another mark against Joseph. The robe had made him visible. The dreams made him threatening. The more he seemed set apart, the more alone he became. And Joseph did not yet understand how far hatred could go when it is allowed to grow without repentance. There is a dangerous moment in every story of bitterness, when resentment stops being a feeling and becomes a plan. For Joseph's brothers, that moment came far from their father's eyes. Jacob's sons had gone to pasture the flock. Jacob, concerned for them and for the animals, called Joseph and sent him to check on their welfare. Joseph answered with obedience. "Here I am." He left the safety of his father's presence and went searching for the brothers who had already rejected him in their hearts. It is easy to pass quickly over that journey, but it was a journey from love into danger. Joseph walked across the land unaware that every step was carrying him closer to the breaking point of his family's hatred. When he reached Shechem, he did not find them. A man found him wandering in the fields and asked what he was seeking. Joseph said he was looking for his brothers. They had moved on to Dothan. So Joseph continued. He kept searching. He kept walking toward the very men who wished he would disappear. From far away, they saw him coming. Before he reached them, before he could speak, before they could hear why he had come, they recognized him. Perhaps they saw the robe. Perhaps they saw the familiar shape of him crossing the field. Perhaps even at a distance, his presence stirred everything they had buried inside. And they said, "Here comes this dreamer. Not Joseph, not brother, the dreamer." They reduced him to the thing they hated most. Then the thought came that would change his life. They said they could kill him and throw him into one of the pits. They could say a wild animal had devoured him. Then they would see what would become of his dreams. It was not only Joseph they wanted to silence. It was the future they feared. But Reuben, the oldest, heard their plan and tried to deliver him. He urged them not to take Joseph's life. Instead, he told them to throw him into a cistern in the wilderness, intending to come back later and rescue him. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers seized him. They stripped him of his robe. The symbol of his father's love was torn away by the hands of his own family. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it, only stone, dust, darkness, and fear. Joseph had come to see whether they were well. Now he was the one crying out from below. Above him, his brothers sat down to eat. That detail is painful because it is so ordinary. They did not flee in panic. They did not tremble at what they had done. They sat down for a meal while their brother remained trapped beneath them. The world can feel especially cold when life continues normally above your suffering. When others can speak, eat, trade, and laugh while you are still in the pit. Then they lifted their eyes and saw a caravan traveling toward Egypt, carrying valuable goods through the land. Judah spoke. What profit would there be in killing Joseph and hiding his blood? Better to sell him. After all, he was their brother, their own flesh. The words sounded restrained, but they were not mercy. Mercy does not turn a brother into merchandise. It was a way to remove Joseph without carrying the weight of his death. So they pulled him from the cistern. For a brief moment, Joseph was lifted into the light, but it was not freedom. It was sale. Silver changed hands. Joseph was handed over to merchants traveling down to Egypt. The caravan moved on, and with every step, the hills of his father's land faded behind him. The tents of Jacob disappeared. The voices of his brothers became memory. The robe was gone. The life he had known was gone. Joseph was carried away from home, not because strangers had stolen him first, but because his own brothers had let him go. When Reuben returned to the pit and found Joseph gone, he tore his clothes in distress. But by then, the brothers had chosen their lie. They took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the garment in blood. Then they brought it to Jacob. They did not say Joseph was dead. They let the robe speak. They asked their father to recognize whether it was his son's robe. Jacob recognized it. The robe that had once been a sign of love became the instrument of his grief. He believed that a wild animal had taken Joseph from him. He tore his garments, put on the clothing of mourning, and grieved for his son many days. His children tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said he would go down to the grave mourning for his son. While Joseph was being taken into Egypt alive, Jacob was grieving him as dead. This is one of the deepest sorrows in the story. A father mourning what he does not know. A son suffering where his father cannot reach him. A family living under the weight of a lie. The brothers had removed Joseph from their sight, but they had not removed the pain. Sin often promises relief and leaves behind a heavier burden. Joseph descended into Egypt, a land of power, wealth, temples, rivers, and rulers. To him, it must have felt like another world. The language was different. The customs were different. The faces were unfamiliar. Everything that had once made him feel known had been stripped away. He was no longer the beloved son in the tents of Jacob. He was a young Hebrew servant in a foreign land. He was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. There, in the house of an Egyptian master, Joseph entered a new season. The pit had not destroyed him, but it had carried him into a life he never chose. He had been betrayed, displaced, and reduced to servitude. Yet Scripture repeats something quiet and powerful. The Lord was with Joseph, not only later, when Joseph stood before Pharaoh, not only when he was honored, not only when Egypt listened to his wisdom. The Lord was with Joseph in Potiphar's house. That does not mean the betrayal was painless. It does not mean Egypt felt like home. It does not mean Joseph understood why his life had collapsed. It means that even in a place he never wanted to be, he was not abandoned. Joseph worked faithfully. He served well. Potiphar saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. Joseph gained favor. He was entrusted with responsibility. Potiphar placed him over his house and all that he had. The young man who had lost nearly everything began again with nothing but faithfulness. He could not control what his brothers had done. He could not return himself to Canaan. He could not force Jacob to know the truth. He could not erase the memory of the pit. But he could be faithful in the place where he stood, and that faithfulness mattered. Sometimes the hidden years of a life are not empty years. They are forming years. Years when character is built where few people see it. Years when integrity is practiced without applause. Years when a person learns to serve well while carrying wounds no one else understands. Joseph rose in Potiphar's house, but his testing was not finished. Potiphar's wife looked at Joseph and desired him. Day after day, she tried to draw him into sin. She pressed him, tempted him, and sought to pull him away from integrity. Joseph refused. His answer was clear. Potiphar had entrusted everything to him. How could he do such a great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph's refusal was not only loyalty to Potiphar, it was reverence before God. He had been betrayed by others, but he would not betray his own conscience. He had suffered injustice, but he would not use pain as permission to do wrong. Then one day, when no one else was in the house, she caught him by his garment. Joseph fled, leaving the garment behind. Once again, a garment became part of his suffering. The first robe had been taken by his brothers and used to deceive his father. Now, another garment was held by Potiphar's wife and used to accuse him falsely. She claimed Joseph had wronged her. The accusation spread through the house. When Potiphar heard her words, his anger burned. Joseph, who had chosen righteousness, was punished as if he had chosen evil. He was sent to prison. The fall must have felt unbearable. From the pit to slavery, from slavery to responsibility, from responsibility to false accusation. from false accusation to prison. If Joseph had measured God's presence only by his circumstances, he might have believed he had been forgotten. Every time he seemed to rise, something pulled him down again. Every time light appeared, another door closed. But again, Scripture says the Lord was with Joseph in prison, not after prison, not outside prison, in it. The Lord showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Soon, Joseph was entrusted with responsibility there as well. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with him. The prison became another hidden place of faithfulness. Joseph served among the confined and forgotten. He learned the faces of men who had lost their freedom. He understood waiting. He understood disappointment. He understood what it meant to live under a sentence he did not deserve. And then 2 men arrived from Pharaoh's own household. The chief cupbearer and the chief baker had offended Pharaoh and were placed in custody in the same prison where Joseph was confined. One night, both men dreamed. Each dream carried its own meaning. In the morning, Joseph saw that they were troubled. He noticed their faces. That small detail matters. Joseph was suffering, yet he still saw the sorrow of others. He had enough compassion left to ask why they looked troubled. Pain had not made him blind. Betrayal had not made him hard beyond feeling. Prison had not erased his concern. The men told him they had dreamed, but there was no one to interpret. Joseph answered with humility, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Then he invited them to tell him their dreams. The cupbearer spoke first. In his dream, there was a vine with 3 branches. As it budded, blossoms came out, and clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in his hand, and he took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph told him the meaning. The 3 branches were 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh would lift up his head and restore him to his office. He would once again place Pharaoh's cup in his hand. Then Joseph made one request. "Remember me when it is well with you. Show kindness to me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house." For Joseph had been taken from the land of the Hebrews, and he had done nothing deserving of imprisonment. It is one of the rare moments where Joseph speaks directly about his own pain. He does not exaggerate. He does not rage. He simply tells the truth. "I was taken. I am innocent. Remember me." The baker, hearing the favorable interpretation, told Joseph his dream as well. But his dream carried a different meaning, one that pointed to judgment rather than restoration. Joseph spoke truthfully even when the meaning was painful. 3 days later, Pharaoh held a feast. The cupbearer was restored to his position just as Joseph had said. The baker's outcome also happened according to the interpretation. The cupbearer returned to the palace. He returned to Pharaoh's presence. He returned to his work, his place, his life. But he did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. There are few words heavier than those. He forgot him. Not Joseph's brothers this time, not Potiphar's wife, not a cruel master. A man Joseph had helped. A man who had received hope through Joseph's interpretation. A man who could have spoken one sentence before Pharaoh and changed Joseph's life. But he forgot him, and Joseph remained in prison for 2 more years. 2 years is easy to say quickly. It is harder to feel. 2 years of mornings behind walls, 2 years of hearing footsteps that were not coming for him, 2 years of wondering whether the cupbearer had spoken, 2 years of hope rising and fading, 2 years of continuing to serve while nothing seemed to change. This is where Joseph's story touches many lives, not only in the betrayal, not only in the pit, but in the waiting, the place between promise and fulfillment, the place where no door seems to open, the place where God is present but quiet. If you have ever felt forgotten in a season you did not choose, Joseph's prison years may speak to you. And if this part of the story connects with something in your own life, you can share in the comments which part of Joseph's journey feels most familiar to you. The pit, the false accusation, the prison, or the waiting. Sometimes one person's reflection becomes a quiet encouragement for someone else who is still waiting. Joseph did not know when the prison door would open, but far above him in the palace of Egypt, a king was about to dream. Pharaoh stood by the Nile in his dream, and from the river came 7 cows, attractive and healthy, feeding in the reed grass. Then 7 other cows came up after them, ugly and thin. The ugly, thin cows ate the 7 healthy cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time. 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. After them came 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. In the morning, Pharaoh's spirit was troubled. He called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. He told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them. The palace, with all its learning and power, had no answer. Then the cupbearer remembered. After 2 years, memory returned. He spoke to Pharaoh of a young Hebrew man in prison, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told how he and the baker had dreamed in one night, and how Joseph had interpreted each dream. As Joseph interpreted, so it happened. Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and in a single day the forgotten prisoner was called from the dungeon. Joseph shaved, changed his clothes, and came before Pharaoh. One moment he was in prison. The next he stood before the most powerful ruler in Egypt. But the change of clothing did not erase the years. The palace did not undo the pit. The summons did not make betrayal painless. Joseph stood there carrying everything he had lived through, but he also stood there prepared in ways no one could see. The boy who had dreamed in Canaan had become a man shaped by suffering, discipline, restraint, and faithfulness. Pharaoh said he had heard that Joseph could interpret dreams. Joseph's answer was not self-promotion. It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Joseph had been lifted suddenly into the presence of power, but he did not claim power for himself. He knew the source of interpretation. He knew that whatever gift he carried belonged to God. Pharaoh told him the dreams. The cows by the Nile, the full and thin ears of grain, the devouring, the fear. Joseph listened. Then he spoke. The dreams were one. God had revealed to Pharaoh what he was about to do. 7 years of great plenty were coming throughout all the land of Egypt. After them would come 7 years of famine, so severe that the abundance would be forgotten. The doubling of the dream meant the matter was fixed by God, and God would soon bring it about. Then Joseph went beyond interpretation. He gave counsel. Pharaoh should choose a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Officers should be appointed to gather a portion of the produce during the 7 plentiful years. Grain should be stored under Pharaoh's authority as a reserve for the years of famine, so the land would not perish. Joseph did not merely explain the crisis. He offered wisdom for preservation. The room must become still after he spoke. Egypt's future had just been unveiled by a Hebrew prisoner. The dreams that troubled Pharaoh now had meaning. The famine that had not yet come could be prepared for before it arrived. Pharaoh saw something in Joseph that could not be ignored. He asked his servants whether they could find a man like this, in whom was the Spirit of God. Then Pharaoh turned to Joseph. Since God had shown him all this, there was none so discerning and wise as Joseph. He would be over Pharaoh's house. All the people would order themselves as he commanded. Only in regard to the throne would Pharaoh be greater. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's hand. He clothed him in fine linen and put a gold chain around its neck. He made him ride in his second chariot, and people called out before him. Joseph was set over all the land of Egypt. The one stripped of his robe by his brothers was clothed in honor by Pharaoh. The one sold as a servant was raised to govern. The one forgotten in prison was remembered in the timing of God. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service. 13 years had passed since he was 17, since he wore the robe, since he went searching for his brothers, since the pit swallowed him into darkness. 13 years of betrayal, slavery, temptation, false accusation, imprisonment, service, waiting, and silence. But those years were not wasted. They had formed the man who could stand before Pharaoh without pride. They had formed the servant who could manage another man's house, then a prison, then a nation. They had formed the heart that could suffer deeply and still remain faithful. During the 7 years of plenty, Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. He gathered grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it because it was beyond measure. Before the famine came, Joseph had 2 sons. He named the first Manasseh, saying that God had made him forget all his hardship and all his father's house. He named the second Ephraim, saying that God had made him fruitful in the land of his affliction. Those names carry the weight of Joseph's soul. He did not pretend affliction had never happened. He called Egypt the land of his affliction. But he also recognized fruitfulness there, not because betrayal was good, not because injustice was right, not because pain should be ignored, but because God had been at work in a story Joseph could not understand while he was living inside it. The pit had looked like an ending. Egypt had looked like exile. Potiphar's house had looked like survival. Prison had looked like abandonment. The cupbearer's forgetfulness had looked like delay without purpose. But behind all of it, God was moving Joseph toward a place he never could have reached by his own plan. This does not make the pain small. It makes the purpose larger than the pain could see. Joseph's story does not teach that betrayal is easy. It does not say waiting is comfortable. It does not ask anyone to pretend that injustice does not wound the heart. It shows something deeper, that God can be present in the pit, that faithfulness matters in hidden places, that being forgotten by people does not mean being forgotten by God, that the years no one sees can prepare a person for a calling no one expected, and that sometimes the road to purpose passes through places we never would have chosen. Joseph did not rise because his brothers were kind. He did not rise because Potiphar's wife told the truth. He did not rise because the cupbearer remembered quickly. He rose because God's hand was not limited by human failure. The robe was gone. The pit was real. The prison was real. The waiting was long. But none of them had the final word. When Joseph stood in Egypt clothed with authority, he was not merely a man who had escaped suffering. He was a man who had been shaped through suffering, preserved through suffering, and positioned beyond what suffering could predict. The dreamer had been sold, but the dreams had not died. And far beyond Joseph's own life, God was preparing a way to preserve many lives through him. This is why his story still speaks across generations. Because many people know what it feels like to be misunderstood. Many know what it feels like to be rejected by those who should have cared. Many know the silence of waiting, the ache of being overlooked, the confusion of doing what is right and still suffering for it. Joseph's life says that the hidden years are not invisible to God. It says that faithfulness in small rooms can matter as much as greatness in public places. It says that the purpose of God may be unfolding even when the evidence seems buried beneath loss, and it invites us to look at our own lives with patience. Not every pit is the end of the story. Not every delay is denial. Not every forgotten season is empty. Sometimes what looks like a closed door is only one chapter in a story still being written. And if Joseph's journey helped you reflect on your own season of waiting, betrayal, or quiet faithfulness, consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your reflection may speak to someone else who needs to be reminded that God's purpose can still be moving even in the places where nothing seems to change. Joseph entered the story as a beloved son wearing a robe. He passed through envy, betrayal, slavery, accusation, prison, and years of silence. But he emerged as a ruler in Egypt, placed in position before the famine came, ready to preserve life when the world around him would begin to hunger. The brothers who sold him saw only a way to remove a dreamer. Potiphar's house saw only a servant. The prison saw only another forgotten man. But God saw the whole road, from the cistern to the palace, from the robe stained with grief to the garments of authority, from the cries no one answered to the wisdom a nation would need. Joseph could not see it all when he was 17. He could not see it from the pit. He could not see it from the prison. But God was present in every unseen step. The pit had been deep. The prison had been long. The silence had been painful. But none of it had been outside the hand of God. And the dreamer sold by his brothers was never outside the reach of the God who was quietly preparing him for what was still to come.